Mordekaiser Bot Lane, a super fun pick, pulling AD carries into the death realm, tanking all of their damage and bonking them to death. This champion uses bot lane to farm CS and champions, becoming an AP burster in mid-game, throwing 1000 damage Qs. No tank items here, dealing as much damage as a marksman, just being much safer. Meet the Revenant, our player who hit EUS Master Tier with this completely new off-meta bot lane style. For a short period of League's history, Mordekaiser was mainly a bot laner, so I interviewed him to find out how he's brought it back in Season 13, and how he's better than ever with a new full damage build. But first, this video is sponsored by Alienware. They sent me the best PC I've ever had, and you can get one too at the link in the description. This is the Aurora R13, the PC I've used for the past 12 months to play games and work on. While I'm playing League, even if I'm streaming or recording, I can play on full settings, and the FPS is always super stable, making sure I never lag in an important fight. But the best thing about this PC is that it's made me want to play more games. I love League of Legends, surprisingly, but sometimes it's good to take a break. As soon as I got this new PC, all I had to do was plug it in, and I could start trying out all of the new games I'd missed. The R13 is great for any challenge you throw at it, from AAA games on maximum settings, to video editing, or even to intensive 3D modelling. For some it may unlock a door to a new job, for others it may unlock the door to new gaming experiences and new ways to enjoy your favourite hobbies. We all have some sort of hidden potential inside us, like me with this YouTube channel that I couldn't do without a good PC like my Alienware. One comment I sometimes see is that people think this PC might have cooling issues. However, I have to say this is not true at all. I've used my PC almost daily for a year and have never had any issues at all. My R13 stays cool whatever I'm doing on it. And even if you did have problems in the future, Dell support is there for you to just fix it. So if you want to upgrade your gaming life, then you can get your own R13 at the link in the description. Back to our Mordekaiser. The Revenant is his name, and his story with Mordekaiser AD carry started in Season 5. Back then he was a normal player playing Mordekaiser in top lane, slowly climbing about one division every year. Plat 1 this year, Diamond 5 the next, Diamond 4 the year after, but he plateaued at Diamond 2, never being able to climb above it with top lane. Even in Season 9 with the Mordekaiser rework coming out, he was still stuck. This was until Season 11. Our player knew he was pretty good at his champion, but hated being in top lane in a 1 vs 1. Morde is quite immobile, so every time he tried to force a fight in top, the enemy could often just walk away or dash out and disengage. He was already struggling to climb, and it became really hard for him to create advantages. So he wondered, was there a better way? He wanted to get into more action, and maybe cover some of these weaknesses. He thought back to old Mordekaiser, a super immobile pick that somehow became meta in bot lane. This was due to its synergy with dragons, and also how well it worked with engaged supports. These picks would help Mordekaiser into fights, so he could use all of his damage, and he no longer felt immobile. So our player took Mordekaiser Bot Lane, playing it with hook supports to engage for him, and enchanters to speed him into fights. And in his first season of only playing this role, he broke through his ceiling and hit Master. Then again in Season 12, Master again with Mordekaiser Bot Lane, really proving how well it works. The goal of this pick is simple: use bot lane to farm kills on squishy AD carries and supports, then use that goal to go full damage, taking over the game. But the way he sets up these kills is not so simple. Starting on loading screen, Revenant decides his game plan. He has two options which depend entirely on the enemy's summoner spells. If enemies have Ignite and Heal, he knows he's about to play super aggressive and get some kills in lane. If enemies have Exhaust, then his burst is suddenly a lot lower, so he has to play to bait this summoner out, and then go for the kills. At level 1, Mordekaiser takes Q. Your early power on this pick is surprisingly high, but at level 1 all you have is a long cooldown mace, so he prefers to use this range to farm instead of trading. Level 2, Mordekaiser takes E. Already he can look for a kill, especially if he has an engage support. Engage supports are a perfect duo for Morde, as they can land a CC at long range, enabling his E pullback to land, which then combos into a free Q, and pulls the enemy in range of your auto attacks. Moving the enemies out of position like this guarantees they're not going to win this fight. This initial burst, plus auto attacks and Mordekaiser's passive damage, is too much for any AD carry to survive, so either they flash away or they die. Another option is if enemies go for a kill on your support. They'll likely use all of their burst and dashes to get into the fight, and this leaves them vulnerable to Morde's E, the pull, letting you combo them and turn the fight around, as they won't expect your early damage. If you don't get an engaged support, or if you're in a harder lane and the enemies have exhaust, then you can play passive as well. Mordekaiser's main strength in bot lane is actually his W, the shield, using it to block poke damage, or alternatively using it as a free sustain tool, or auto-attacking waves to charge it up, then using W twice to regen health, making enemy poke lanes less effective. Whenever he is in a 2 vs 2 fight, it's often not his damage that wins it, it's his shield, activating it at the very last moment to make sure the enemy AD carry doesn't have enough DPS to kill you before they die themselves. Outside of these fights, Mordekaiser AD carry has a hidden advantage, and that is his AoE damage. AD carry as a class pretty much all struggle to shove the wave. Some of them have abilities that help, but in general, marksmen are probably the class with the lowest wave clear. Mordekaiser is the opposite. All of his damage is AoE, and of course he has no mana costs, so he can choose to push whenever he wants. It is super important, however, that once you push the lane, you don't stay. There is no reason to be standing in lane with the wave at the enemy's tower. Mordekaiser's range is not long enough to poke people while they're CSing. All you're doing is overextending and risking your life for nothing. Instead, he uses this time to ward the river, try bush, or even go for a deep ward on the enemy's buff. He can steal a crab for some extra resources, or even try and invade to get a kill. Pretty much anything is more useful than overextending in bot lane. At level 6, Mordekaiser gets ult. Sure, his early game is good, but this is really where the kills start coming in. If enemies ever walk up to trade, instantly he'll hard engage, ulting them. AD carries can never kill him inside Death Realm, they can't outrun him, and they also can't survive his damage. Right away, it's practically a free kill every time you press the button. Unlike in top lane, there's no way for an AD carry to fight their way out. Having exhaust as well on Mordekaiser, even if enemies stood any kind of chance at escaping, that is now gone. He has really cool synergy with the new rune setup, taking magical footwear and approach velocity. These comboed with the slow from exhaust makes it unfairly easy to chase enemies, reaching up to 454 movement speed just from these free stats from your runes. This is enough to easily outrun any AD carry even if they've bought tier 2 boots. The easiest way to set up these kills is to flash E. The E appears at the new location, pulling the enemy towards you, and then ult since you're now in range. This traps the enemy outside tower range so they have nowhere to run, using Q and exhaust to stay on top of them, and auto-attacking them to death. He likes to time flashes himself in the chat, as this helped him set up plays without having to rely on his support. Just like old Mordekaiser, new Mordekaiser bot lane's main goal is to prioritize getting dragon, with Mordekaiser's passive dealing percentage HP damage to monsters. He takes dragons very quickly. He tells his jungler about this, aiming to slow push a big wave into the enemy tower just as dragon spawns, walking over and taking it without a fight. Doing this on every dragon spawn to give his team an extra win condition. If the enemies try to contest, then he just ults their jungler, removing their smite, and no matter what happens afterwards, he'll at least get a free objective for his team. Thanks to the early deep wards that I mentioned, at around 7 minutes, Mord should know exactly when the enemy buff is going to spawn. At this time, he can push the wave and invade again to try and catch the enemy jungler, using this extra knowledge. Since Mord is constantly shoving every wave, pushing and then leaving, Revenant uses this to create a mind game strategy to get extra kills. He pushes the wave, fakes a base, and then paths into this bush. This works specifically because you set up this expectation of shoving the wave and leaving, so enemies will see you do this over and over again and are trained to remember it. So then the one time you don't actually leave, they're not going to expect it and they should die to this play. A hidden benefit of playing Mordekaiser bot lane is removing probably your biggest counter, QSS, as even if the AD carry buys it, you can just ult their support. And even if the support buys it as well, by the time that happens you'll probably have finished laning phase, can move to mid, and can then just use it on one of the other 3 enemies. Picking up his first item Royalize and then buying Rocket Belt, he now has another combo for getting picks. The Rocket Belt projectiles work with the Royalize slow, so even though Mordekaiser is a low range champion, this increases the range he can get picks, slowing the enemy to set up his E pull or an ultimate, trapping them and setting up a pick. Royalize is so good on Mordekaiser due to his cooldowns being quite long. This, as well as a full damage build that only takes a couple of Qs to get a kill, means that you never want to miss a single ability, and Royalize makes this a lot easier. But more importantly, the Rocket Belt and early Sork Shoes have really good synergy with Mordekaiser as a champion, due to how well he uses Magic Pen. His whole kit is built around it, with his ult removing 10% magic resist from the enemy, his E taking 15%, and once you add on these extra items, enemies are taking at least 15% total extra damage, all due to this seemingly small stat. In teamfights, Mordekaiser is an AP mage. With this added mobility and a Zhonya's on top, you can still be kind of a frontliner with your shield, but deal big damage and then have Zhonya's to keep you safe. In this role, you can draw a lot of pressure from enemies enemies and take their attention, deal good damage, but still be safer than a normal AD carry. And unlike most AD carries, you have a get out of jail free button, doing a safety ult. If you get jumped on by a couple of enemies, you can pop your damage, and then ult to get yourself away from the danger, kiting out and still getting a kill while you get to safety. Most games are won by Mordekaiser getting picks, stacking dragon, and using his high damage to carry. One very unique thing about this pick is that he does have slightly longer games than we usually see. I wasn't really expecting this at all, and I think it's very interesting. I would guess it's due to not having a ranged AD carry, so bot lane becomes a lot less snowball-y. The game becomes more about macro and team fighting instead of being over as soon as one tower falls. It's really a pleasure to watch this guy play because every single game is full of competitive fights and action, which can be quite rare in normal solo queue. Riot can definitely learn something from this pick. Before we rate this pick, I have to say that currently Morde bot lane is not in the best spot. The champion did get nerfed, however this didn't affect Mordekaiser bot lane at all. It was only a nerf to the jungle, so that isn't the reason. The main reason is the bot lane meta, with engaged supports no longer being the kings of bot lane, meaning that it's harder to get these really good duo matchups. The pick itself, however, is still working very well, and with lots of the tank items being nerfed, the AP build is still looking very good. AD carries may have just had a big buff on the newest patch, but they're still AD carries at the end of the day, and no buff is going to help them survive a full damage Mordekaiser's Death Realm, and that is why I highly recommend this pick. Every game he bans Vayne, as she is the only AD carry that can avoid death in his ultimate, or even dodge the initial cast using her invisibility. The best picks to go with Morde are things like Nautilus, Alistar, or Thresh, engaged champions that help enable his damage. For his full Morde bot lane build, he actually can start Dark Seal in some matchups, such as against low range supports, but Doran Shield is much safer against poke champions. Rylai's Rush into Sork Shoes, then Rocket Belt most games for the mobility and burst, having Riftmaker as an option if you're against multiple tanks, then going Zhonya's for the safety, and finishing the build off with whatever you need, either more damage to be your team's carry, or becoming more of a frontliner with tank items, finishing the game as a real juggernaut. For his runes he goes the classic Conqueror, but with the secondaries for the game-changing synergy and movement speed. Our player has nothing to promote other than Mordekaiser, but thanks again to Alienware for sponsoring this video and helping me every month. If you want to get a PC just like mine, click the link in the description, and thanks so much for watching.